Explosions and gunfire, cars on fire, people running in all directions, some with injuries and many visibly shaken, as you can imagine. Police and the army moving in on a rescue mission. This was the scene at the Dusit Hotel in Nairobi this afternoon, with nearby offices and shops also affected. Shortly after that, the terrorist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack. Now, this story is still unfolding in Kenya's capital, as we welcome senior researcher for transnational threats and international crime at the Institute for Security Studies, Allan Ngari.
Thank you.
Allan, what happened?
Well, as you have rightly said, very shocking images coming out of Nairobi. Dusit Hotel has been attacked. Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility, and it's quite shocking that this happens at this particular time of the year, and today especially. It's 3 years since there was an attack against the Kenyan Defence Forces stationed in Somalia, El Ade, and we were commemorating the death of quite a number of Kenyan Defence Force members who are part of AMISOM. And so this afternoon we have this attack, and it's ongoing.
So it could be a message there, but this also comes a day after 3 men are to face trial.
That's right.
For the previous attack on a mall.
That's right.
I mean, that could be a message too. And I'm assuming that we can assume that it's Al-Shabaab, right?
There's a lot of speculation as to the motivations why the attack has happened today. But going with what we have heard from sources this afternoon, Al-Shabaab has claimed responsibility for this. And it has every indication, the attack has every indication that it is very similar to what we saw in Westgate in September 2013. And again,
I mean, it's the massive sort of attack, isn't it?
That's right.
Random gunfire, explosives,
in a very
many of them.
In a very popular Nairobi situation, scenario. And you know, the very fact that that terrorism really causes a lot of panic, we saw that this afternoon. I mean, all indications in social media is that this really was really badly received, of course, by the people in Nairobi, the residents, the people around, the people within Dusit Hotel and the surrounding buildings. But what's particularly interesting is how social media and Kenyans on Twitter particularly took this whole situation. There were first indications that I mean, there was suspicion that it was a bank robbery, and only a little later, and within minutes, we saw the Kenyan Defence Forces, the Reese Squad, which is an elite squad within the Kenyan Defence Force, respond quite quickly. And quite differently from Westgate, there was a more coordinated approach, response at this time.
Do you think that really jolted them into realizing the attack that's not only on their borders, but inside their country?
Yes, I think the Kenyan intelligence as well as security forces are very, very alive to the attacks from Al-Shabaab. This obviously is not the first attack, and continues to be very vigilant to ensure that these attacks do not happen. Unfortunately, this one has happened, but suffice it to say that there has been really coordinated efforts since as way back as September 2013 with Westgate. We also remember in 2015 there was the Garissa University College attack, El Ade, as I mentioned, 3 years ago to the date today. And so we are seeing a better response from the intelligence and first responders. But one of the issues that we emphasize particularly at the Institute for Security Studies is a criminal justice response as well. Now, quite clearly, this afternoon you need that military response. But quite concomitant to that, we also need the criminal justice system to come in place. And I think this is why we are also celebrating the Westgate trials that are due to start this week.
What does it suggest about Al-Shabaab's strength? I mean, obviously, you know, they've got a greater force in Somalia. You've had problems with refugee camps in the middle that have been used, which has exacerbated the issue, hasn't it? So where are we now? Because Somalia also, at some stage, was able to push them back.
Right. So the African Union's AMISOM, the mission in Somalia, which of course is manned by quite a number of countries' defense forces, Kenya included, Uganda included, they have had quite some significant push back on Al-Shabaab. I do not think that the Al-Shabaab violent extremist group is increasing in size. In fact, indications are that within Al-Shabaab itself there are factions. We are seeing other violent extremist groups also operating in Somalia. And so its control over territory is definitely thinning. And the Somali government has obviously stepped up to plate and also taken quite a number of initiatives. There is a lot of international support as well to try and combat the Al-Shabaab activities, not just in Somalia, but within the Greater Horn.
I mean, sadly, you've seen this with ISIL or ISIS, whatever you want to call them, whatever you choose. You know, this is seen as a success when they attack innocent people, and often that gets them support, doesn't it?
I think
not outside support, but if anyone wants to fight for that sort of cause, of course.
Well, we are seeing more and more, we are seeing the narratives that are coming from violent extremist groups in terms of this being a heroic movement. That narrative is being readily destroyed, not just by people that are against violent extremist groups, states, communities, but people who themselves have been part of violent extremist groups and have either defected or have completely been traumatized by their experiences there. So no, I do not think that Al-Shabaab is either gaining support of the people or attracting more people. But of course, we are alive to the fact that there are some push factors from certain communities, the conditions that are conducive also for radicalization within communities.
I mean, that's the problem with all of these groups, isn't it? I mean, it's the fertile ground when you've got unemployment and people feeling that they're out of the system, possibly.
And they prey on these vulnerabilities and these vulnerable communities. But, you know, we, in the work that we do in the Great Horn of Africa, in East Africa, our engagement with state agencies as well as community-based organizations, we are fast seeing a decrease in people who feel marginalized joining violent extremist groups for the very reasons that they themselves, once they defect or for whatever reasons they leave, they don't have any positive stories to say about being a part of Al-Shabaab specifically.
Well, good. That's a little bit of a light at the end of this horrific tunnel.
Indeed.
Allan, thank you very much for speaking to us. Allan Ngari.
Thank you.
Up next, will the Brexit deal work for Britain and us?